Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Calvarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin is here. Susan Hobson, just about to head to the lake. Susan, how are you?
I can't wait. I'm so excited. I know it's Monday in podcast land, but it's Friday over here, and I'm just a couple of hours away from my cold dips, my dock, my beautiful lake. Oh, I can't wait to be immersed in Mother Nature. The best recovery that we got. How about you,
That's
sir?
well, I'm already immersed in nature. Um, the cat climbed up into my lap, so we're doing all right today. And yeah, so obviously we got to start off the show. I got a stat today, and
Oh,
obviously you'll see why. But 65.1% of the workforce experiences a destructive leader. And this ranges from an arrogant and violent boss, which you can think of Gordon Ramsay, the role he plays on Hell's Kitchen, all the way to a cowardly boss. And probably the worst part about this is about 25% of the workforce experiences both a boss that's either arrogant and violent or an abusive narcissist. So
oh,
these are the folks that are the actively destructive, at least from the research perspective. So these are the bad bosses that we all know and hate. Uh, and with that, we have a special guest with us today, Molly McGrath, the author of Fix My Boss and the founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. Molly, how are you?
I am well. I'm excited for this conversation today.
Absolutely. And so, Molly, before we get into fixing my boss, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've owned hiring and empowering solutions since 2008. And way back when stepped into my career back in 1997, I was an executive assistant for a legal organization. So by and large, I work with lawyers and law firms. And as you know, the stereotypical, arrogant, narcissistic, heavy, hard, it's all true for the most part. And so my work's cut out for me. I started out as an executive assistant, like I said, and I was very fortunate in 1997. I had a coach that was assigned to me. This legal organization wanted to start coaching attorneys to become better humans, better leaders. And back in 97, coaching really wasn't a street term in the legal profession. Thankfully, they're embracing it and they're starting to have awareness around being better leaders, what have you. So I had a coach that took me under his wing, and the rest is history, as they say. He coached the attorneys, and I became really, really passionate about the employees because we'd go to the cocktail parties at all these legal seminars, and I'd say, tell me about your practice. Tell me about your business. What's working? What's not working? And universally, I would hear, business would be great, but for the employees. And then I would turn to the employees and they would say, I would love my job if my attorney would just stop being a control freak and give up control and allow me to do the work that they hired me for. So I saw there was just this massive disconnect, and I went on a mission to really empower employees to become what I call entrepreneurs in the entrepreneurs world, how to find their voice and how to really speak up and step up so their attorneys can have confidence that they have competence to let go and lead.
woo, so much to dig into here, Molly. You know where I want to start, though, is that you obviously found an appreciation for how crucial and requisite coaching is in the leadership development space. So I'm curious what you learned when you were first exposed with that first coach that you mentioned that really helped to catalyze all of this mission that you just described.
Well, I had a pretty bold coach. He was coached by Tony Robbins, Hoffman Process Landmark Forum. So he was in your face. And I remember my first experience with him. After working with him for a day at a conference, he pulls me aside. He's like, I don't know who told you that you weren't worth a crap and who never poured into you, but the first thing that you need to work on is your confidence. And the only way that you get confident is to become courageous. So we're going to work on your courage to find your voice and to learn how to use your voice in a powerful way that can transform and make a difference for others. And from that point, I had never been exposed to coaching ever. It was incredibly vulnerable. Really, he cracked me open. I'd watch him crack open attorneys. They'd stand up at the mic and be bawling their eyes out and just see the transformation happen immediately. It was pretty powerful. And I was at the tender age of 27 years old, working with attorneys, top intellect in the country. I had dropped out of college because traditional education wasn't for me. And I was like, I'm an imposter in this room. I have no right being in this room. And, he took a massive leap on me and just poured into me. And I believe that every employee deserves that, because typically coaching is only available for entrepreneurs, C-suite, leaders, and I think we're missing a massive mark there.
We definitely concur.
Yeah, we love that. And
yeah.
And Molly, like when you say your confidence grew and you're talking about coaching for, regular individual contributors throughout an organization, what kind of changes do you see in organizations when their folks get that level of coaching?
It is life altering. And, so often I'll hear from leaders and entrepreneurs quite often that nobody cares as much as I do about the business. Gary Vee has all these videos out there about employees, like they're never going to care as much. And that is completely different than what I have experienced. They're sitting in silence. Employees believe that there was this unwritten rule book. You're lucky to have a job. Your job is to show up, keep your mouth shut, put your head down, do what you're told, and you'll be rewarded with a paycheck. But then I'd hear on the opposite end from leaders and entrepreneurs that, I'm in back-to-back meetings, coaching, consulting with clients, sales meetings, operations meetings, and I come out and there's a line of people with buckets of problems and trying to delegate back up to me. And when I can get an employee to really understand how to use their voice, how to have courageous conversations in an honest, respectful manner with CEO language and tonality attached to it. One of my favorite quotes from the movie We Bought a Zoo, when Matt Damon says at the beginning of the movie, all it takes is 20 seconds of insane courage. And I anchored to that to say, when you know what the answer is or the solution for the process, production, whatever it might be, come find your voice and find a way to propose it, never with problems, but always propose solutions. So when I can see somebody quivering and shaking and being like, why are we doing it this way? And raising their hand and starting to ask really powerful questions, and see an entrepreneur or leader step back and kind of crink their neck and be like, whoa, nobody's ever asked me that question. Even consultants that I pay so many millions of dollars to, what have you, they start to really begin to embrace it. So when I can train employees to come with proposed solutions, not problems, to make sure they do their due diligence and research, and then come with powerful questions and solutions, I can see that everything can change. Because until an entrepreneur has confidence and they understand your beginning, middle, end, and why you're suggesting that we do what we do, they're never going to let go and trust.
That is so freaking true. I want to talk about this whole concept of finding your voice, especially in the face of imposter syndrome, because the Lord knows we work with a bunch of high achievers in our practice and we see a lot of that imposter syndrome. So what is the coaching in terms of, if we have people listening, we have a crowd full of leaders, if they want to empower their people to find their voice and find their courage, let's walk them through how about you would recommend that they do that?
I have a lot of strategies in my book, and that's why I titled my book, Fix My Boss. Because so often leaders will go to conferences, listen to podcasts, hear these amazing books that are business books that are written for the entrepreneur. And they get excited about it and they buy a case of books and hand it out to their people, what have you. And the way it lands for employees is, this is written to fix you. And so I found a way to write a book that is fun, cheeky, lighthearted. Imagine an entrepreneur coming in and being like, hey, I might possibly be the problem. Why don't you read this book and make some suggestions for me? So I always say for leaders, in my book, I start off with just get really present and still. And it can start with one question that says, what are you not seeing that you wish you could see and have in regards to time, attention, technology, tools, and training that would support you in your role? And then be completely quiet about that. At first, it'll be very, very telling when you have crickets, when you get the deer in the headlight look and nobody has anything to offer. It might be that this is very foreign, and it's very telling that you maybe have not created a safe culture and container for people to use your voice. And now you don't get frustrated. You're like, okay, we got some work to do here. I'm going to get deeply curious, and I'm going to start peeling the layers of this onion and start asking powerful questions and having it in a framework where I allow for people. And if you're not getting any insight or any response from a team, what's the saying? Leaders go first. So then you start really being vulnerable and sharing what you're seeing. So it might be, what I'm seeing, what we're not really seeing is that I'm the bottleneck in the business. And when you start taking responsibility for your role and for your part consistently, persistently, you will start to see people to begin to crack. And I always say, let's embrace the breakdown to get to the breakthrough.
I love that. I think that's a Tony Robbins quote right there. Probably rippling effect from your coach. And then how about in terms of some of the biggest, because you wrote a book on this very subject. So what are some of the most classic mistakes that leaders make when they're trying to empower this type of courage and expression from their people?
I think the first biggest mistake is hiding out behind this. We're so busy all the time and not being available for your human beings. I think I was listening to a podcast, Susan, your last one, and you said this, and I loved it because you said your human beingness, not your human doingness. And I always say that you're hiring human beings first and foremost, and then the human doing second. And I think that entrepreneurs have it wrong. So the first mistake they're making, they're not available for their people. You're hiring human beings, and at the core, human beings want time, attention, and feedback. So if you can create a structure and a framework where you are consistently, just like you build an SOP or a workflow or a system in your business, you need to do that for your internal client, which is your employees. And that's whether it's 1099, overseas, stateside, independent contractors, what have you. That when you can hardwire in your calendar for maybe a weekly meeting with everybody, I like to call it a weekly stakeholders meeting. Everybody that we employ is a stakeholder in this business. We all want to get the business in our bones and our blood. And then having quarterly employee growth plans. I don't like to call them performance reviews. Those are not empowering. They're not exciting, and everybody dreads them. So when you can create a structure and a framework to be available, it's one thing to have it on your calendar, but when you're swooping in and you're on your cell phone and you're bringing this heavy, frantic energy in the room, everyone's going to shut down. So you're responsible for the energy you bring in the room and leave in the room. So being available for your people and whatever hacks and tricks you have to do to make it hardwired in your calendar, just like you would for a finance meeting.
Molly, this sounds like we have to start a lot with the mindset and the beliefs of the leader themselves. Like, where do you recommend leaders out there begin, or how do they start to turn this curiosity as part of the way that they see the world?
I think it starts with, first and foremost, to have a 2 millimeter shift in your mindset that employees are the biggest headache in your business and that they're a liability and that they don't care. Nobody wants to work. All the stories that we hear out in social media about quiet quitting, the great resignation, entitlement mentality, you have to just drop all that. I always love when Brene Brown said, you can go on a witch hunt for evidence for either the good or the bad. So just really shifting it and saying that you're going to commit and get deeply curious and present and still to believe you're going to even enter this exercise in this new way of being, that my employees are the best thing on the planet. I'm so grateful and thankful for the people that I employ. And then maybe they're sitting in the wrong seat, and then take responsibility. Maybe we didn't give them enough training, coaching, onboarding, or what have you. And so it starts there of just drop the resentment and drop the head trash that we've all been fed, that they don't care, that they just want a paycheck, that they're clock watchers and all that, because nothing could be further in the truth. They are sitting there in silent, waiting for entrepreneurs and leaders to stop being a whirling dervish, constantly busy, constantly unavailable, constantly, like, we all have really, really convincing reasons why we're so busy, money, clients, all that. But the day that you're not busy is the day you're out of business. So, like, I train my clients I work with, we're never allowed to use the word busy ever again. Ever again. Because we want to be productive. We want to be constantly in service. But busy is just a trap, and you're never going to get out of it. None of us are getting 9 days a week and 96 hours in the week. It's just not happening. And even if we did, we'd still have a story in our head. It's not enough. And so it really starts with shifting your mindset and, like, being like, I can't wait to embark on this project. You know, we love projects as business owners and leaders and what have you. This new funnel, this new hack, this new initiative. This is the greatest initiative before you invest in any strategic or marketing or double your revenue, blah, blah, blah. You have to go back to basics.
Yes, I totally agree. Busyness is avoidance is what we say to our high achievers, right? Because they don't realize, like, it's this, yeah, that's their anxiety. That's not motivation, right? And, like, that's how they're able to avoid the vulnerable, tougher things, right? That aren't necessarily frantic or go, 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 go. But yeah, it's busyness is avoidance of the vulnerability, I feel like, right? In terms of slowing down to actually understand what you're feeling as a leader, what your people are feeling as a leader. That's what that busyness is, right? Is like trying to avoid that type of deeper connection point with our people.
It is. And what I hear from team members all the time, they're like, it's so incredibly painful to watch them every day. And then, you know, they're like, well, don't you want to, you know, more opportunity? And they're like, I've been watching you every day. Like, no, I'm good. I don't want that. Like, I don't want that. I'm good, you know, but they do want more opportunity. But so often in my experience, I see employees are like, I just watch them and it breaks my heart. Like, they're just cannot. Like, I always say, the time to change tires, not when you're going 90 miles down the highway. You have to have the power of the pause and stop, and then allow your team to support you so you can get out of this. But to your point, I love that. It's hard because if we stop hiding out in the busyness, then we might have to take a look at what part we're playing, which we always have to, as leaders, it starts with us.
That self-responsibility. I want to talk about the employee, since this is whom you're really focused on. I know your book's called Fix My Boss, but really we're trying to empower the employees and their courage and their voice. So what are some tips, strategies, tactics that we can give employees so that they actually can own this themselves in their own development? Because I also caught what you said a second ago. The coaching goes to the leaders, the C-suite, the entrepreneurs, but the employees themselves aren't getting some of this coaching. So let's give them some of this coaching. How can we, you know, lead our employees in the direction of their own empowerment?
I love that. You know, for me, I tell them to take the leap first, you know, and go to your leader, go to your entrepreneur, whoever it is that is your supervisor or manager, and start to make suggestions that I talk about in the book. You know, I see that we're constantly having communication ping pong going on in Slack and email, and I've been noticing, and take track of where you see a breakdown in people, process, and production. You have to speak into somebody's listening in a way that makes a difference for them. So you have to have CEO language. They're not available for you to come in there and talk, just have a lot of language and story and what have you. Get to the point, get to the bottom line. So if you can become an auditor, if you will, as you're witnessing the things that aren't working from your role or what have you, or maybe collectively as your team or pod, depending on the size of your department, and then go first and say, here's my recommendation. Can we schedule a meeting to work on this one process or what have you? I've been watching you. I've been watching the Slacks. I've been watching the emails, what have you, and take one thing first that can make a big impact for the business. So when you even come up and show up with different language, with CEO level language, not drama and tears, and you have a solution to the problem, you're going to get their attention. Right down to when people say to me, just the receptionist. First of all, that language is so disempowering. Number one. Number two, it's the most important position in any business, or director of first impressions. If they don't do a great job, you don't have clients to meet with. And so I like to start with the front of the house, the administrative team. I'm even training right now VAs in the Philippines, what have you, really how to have CEO language. So it really starts with leaders go first, but then employees, you coming with proposed solutions from a place of where it impacts the business, because then you will get their attention.
Such great strategy. I'm just thinking about one of the things that I reinforce in leaders. If you're listening to this tip right now, make sure you recognize your people when they step up with courage, take the initiative, and bring you something that's going to be high value add and impactful in terms of your bottom line. That's definitely one of the things that I feel like leaders oftentimes forget to do, that is massively important aspect of positively reinforcing that type of behavior, right? But yeah, that's something that I feel like I want to explore a little bit more in terms of when we actually are employees and we are going into an organization in the hiring process. What are some of those powerful questions that our employees can ask their leaders so that they actually can ascertain that they have a leader who's capable of empowering them in this way?
Oh, that's my favorite part, is the interviewing and the hiring before you begin to onboard. So for employees that may be listening to this, some questions, like, tell me about your culture. That word is so fuzzy and muddy anymore. And I always tell the employees to ask them, what is currently not working in your business or in this role that I'm interviewing for, or this department? What's not working for it? Talk to me, walk me through my job description and tell me, if I were to get a home run for you, entrepreneur and leader, what would it look like 30 days after the day I started? It is really clear where they're like, they don't even have a job description possibly, or they're like, I'm not really sure. And then they can, in the interview, have a conversation. I say this for both sides, entrepreneur, the interviewer, and the employee, or what have you. You will see very quickly how you can unpack a problem or something, create something from nothing, and how your collaboration goes within that. So a lot of times when employees ask that, they're like, well, that's a great question. I don't really know, because number one, they've never done your job, so they really don't know what it is you do all day. And so it allows for an opportunity, because on day one, guess what? After you fill out the HR forms, get your passwords, get your email, all that logistical stuff that takes what? Maybe an hour max? Then what? Like, what are we doing for the first 30 days? And how do I know that I brought great value to you? What would it look like in 30 days? And that I made the right move by choosing you as my employer. What would it look like? And what would a home run look like for me?
And that's just, by the way, definitely going to get you the job, because that comes off as confident, right? And that instills trust from your leader, right? In terms of your credibility and expertise, I feel like.
Yeah, I always say that plan your work and work your plan, and that's how you're going to. So during the interviews, and like, walk me through what my day is going to look like. Walk me through what your day is going to look like now that you have entrepreneurial and visionary freedom. Once hiring me, obviously I'm going to be freeing you up. What are you doing with your newfound time now that's going to grow this business?
Oh, freaking good. Yeah, that's definitely getting you hired, folks, because, that just shows your potential leader that you know your worth, that you know your value. It's very opposite of imposter syndrome, I feel like.
Yeah. And for any entrepreneurs that's thinking, like, is it time to hire? I know I need to hire. Take these questions and maybe ask yourself them before you even put the ad out there and really envision, like, what is this going to look like just 30 days from now? So often I'll hear from people, well, it's going to take 6 months to onboard someone. Hogwash. None of us have the time or luxury for that. So I'm always like, let's gamify this thing. How can we not take it from 6 months to 30 days?
Oh my gosh, I
I
feel like
was
that's a
just,
whole other
yeah.
podcast. I want to know. Or your next book, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sorry,
From
Rob.
the interviewee perspective, if they don't know what they want you to do, that's a red flag. So just be careful of this
Bingo.
on that
Sometimes it is. I love that you say that because sometimes they're like, I don't really know. I've had a graveyard of past employees that have been here and weren't able to, and I don't know why. Was it me? Was it them? Was the job description, the role, or what have you? But sometimes when I'll shadow interview, sometimes like, I don't really know. The entrepreneur is saying that. And right then and there shows vulnerability because they're not just trying to fake it and make up these esoteric KPIs or whatever they say. And then if they can have this banter back and forth and collaboration, like, well, the job ad said blah, blah, blah. In my past job, when I started out, I was the first employee and we were in the exact same position. Let me show you what I did for him or her in the first 30 days. And this kind of what we did to create a framework and a process and KPIs for this job. And the entrepreneur is like, oh my God, yes, that and blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, great. Now we're really going to work really great together because we can have this banter. You're listening to my ideas. You're present. You're actually adding to them or subtracting from them. And at the end of the day, it's communication. It's the greatest breakdown in every relationship. And an employer-employee, it's a two-sided relationship, not one-sided.
Molly, what would you say to leaders out there who say they don't have enough time in the day?
I get it. I feel your struggle. Trust me. And I have to check myself constantly. It may be true. It may not be true, but it's an emotion and it's a feeling until you're willing to stop. So what I say to them constantly is get a time template. It might not be about time management. It's focus management. So really start time chunking all the things that you have to. I know the 80-20 rule, all the things that we hear all the time, blah, blah, blah. I hear from entrepreneurs. You don't understand my world. You're not shadowing me on the daily, what have you. Find somebody a key team member that you can, not a business coach, that could be secondary, but somebody who sees you in action daily. They're on the receiving end. I hear this all the time. And I work with attorneys that they're in court, they're in trial, what have you. They're so busy, what have you. They can't sit down and have a conversation with their team member, whatever it might be. But then they have time to write a 7-paragraph email. I'm like, how long did it take you to write that thing versus just having a 10-minute daily huddle with your team member? So when you feel like you don't have time, you have to stop, get deeply curious about everything on your current calendar, on your secret to-do list, on your I wish list, and all of it, and lay it out on the conference room table. Find someone on your team. Again, vulnerability. They'd be like, I can't continue like this. This is madness. You see me every day, what have you. And so let's sit down and start breaking this down and seeing everything that you are working on. I have a time effectiveness exercise in the book. And then after that, figuring out what you can delegate once and for all off your calendar, because it might be true that there's just way too much is being expected of you and you're holding on to stuff that there are people waiting in the wings to gladly take off your plate. And if you don't have that person in your organization, let's go hire them and find them. I mean, right now I have 5 full-time people in the Philippines that are working for me. They are amazing. And once a quarter, my team, we go through time studies and what have you, and we all put it all together and see, because then when I'm jammed up, you better believe it, there's a trickle down effect.
Mhm.
And so what can we do to hire someone for 5 hours, 10 hours, whatever it might be, a week, a month, to take this off our plate? And that's how you continue to level up and scale. But just being in the vicious cycle in the blender and just constantly saying it, I cannot stand the statement, it is what it is. That is not true.
The fixed
It's
mindset.
an active choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's an example of that old school fixed mindset, right?
Yes.
Where it's just like acceptance of how work has always been done and how it will always therefore be done, right? But yeah, this is why you have to get off of that freaking treadmill or hamster wheel known as your autopilot, right? So that you can actually be present enough with your people to discover your people's capacity. So then you see the opportunities to empower them to step up and bring you some relief, right?
Absolutely. You know, what's a quote? If you don't make time for your health, you're going to be forced to make time for your illness. And it's the same thing. Like, Susan, you're going to the lake. You're about ready to head off on vacation. I always tell people, think about before you go on vacation, right? You're getting in your vehicle to go drive to the lake or whatever. You're like, gosh, I got so much done. I crushed it right before vacation because I know I want my time off. Why can't we live like that every single day? And really, you know, I'm always a fan of gamification and racing the clock and time chunking and things of that nature. But you do not wait for the massive breakdown or the rock bottom or whatever stories that we have where, unfortunately, when we really do get sick and we're laid up, then we get serious about when we're forced to delegate and what have you. And guess what? It turns out better than when you were white knuckling all this stuff on your own, thinking you were the only one who cared, which is not true. And, you know, my coach always tells me the answer's in the room. So entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries listening to this, just really expect that your team member know the solution to the problems of busyness, of too much on my plate, not enough time, what have you, because they do know the solution if you would actually stop and talk to them and allow them to use their voice, and you be quiet when you ask the question versus trying to come to the solution. Allow them, because the answer is in the room.
Yes. Yeah. When
Amazing.
you step back, it really empowers your people to step up and show you what they're working with.
Yes.
Sorry, Rob.
No, it's amazing. It's such a great tip. And Molly, we have to ask you this question because we love this question on the show. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, my goodness. You know, for me, is that I transform businesses and transform lives one employee at a time.
I love it. And for folks out there, if you want to find Molly, you can head on over to hiringandempowering.com. You can get her book, Fix My Boss, on her website there. I've also dropped Molly's LinkedIn in the podcast notes. Is there anywhere else you want folks to find you?
You can listen to my podcast. I've been podcasting for 5 years, and I'm incredibly passionate about employee-employer relationship, and it's called Hire and Empower, and you can find it on all the podcast channels.
Amazing. So when you are listening to this one, wherever you're listening to it, just Google that. You can hit subscribe, as well as obviously hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project, wherever you're listening to it right now, and share both the shows with any leaders in your life. Susan, what do you want to leave our folks with today?
This is why they say you speed up by slowing down. And I always knew that as an athlete, you know, like I had to go to the bench. I had to like reset, right? I couldn't just play at top speed in perpetuity. That's a ticking time bomb, folks. Brick walls or glass ceilings, right? It often needs to be the pain that catalyzes us to awakening us to our untapped potential. But the method to the madness that Molly has definitely done an amazing job breaking down for us today is that when you actually slow down and get present and actively listen to your people, that's where the growth lives, because that's where you open up new choice. And if you're not conscious and present enough, you are never going to find the new choices that are going to help you scale and grow both your business, your bottom line, and your people. I love this interview. It's ripe with strategies. Our folks are going to love it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Molly. And of course, for me, I would like to say that we all have these challenges. It's completely normal, completely natural. And it's actually often what makes us a great entrepreneur from taking it from 0 to 1 is the thing that we need to transition to become the great leader that takes it from 1 to 10. And so often what Molly's talking about is this transition point where you need to identify and change the way that you lead and run your business. And that's really where you're going to find success. And there's an incredible number of stats on this, but 85% of venture-backed companies don't make it to that next point because their founders are unable to make this transition. So, and I think it's 70 to 80%, actually the venture capital funds kick them out of their own business and install somebody who can lead and grow a business.
Wow.
Right? So if you're an entrepreneur listening to this and you're taking funding, listen to Molly. You have to make this transition. Otherwise, not a lot of great things are going to happen. So do that before you get turfed from your own business. Yeah, Molly, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show this week.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.